Again, I am Connie Leeper, the organizing director for NC Warren, and I have the privilege to welcome you to our final event for today, the Clean Path 2025 Conference, Taking Charge of Our Electricity Power. This conference, as I said earlier, is a part of our ongoing work to implement the strategy laid out in our 2017 Clean Path Plan. This plan is for getting North Carolina electricity off fossil fuels by 2030 and getting us halfway there by 2025. The report was written by our keynote speaker today, who is Bill Powers, who has written a supplement to the report. At NC1, we work really hard to find that balance between not sugarcoating our climate crisis with straight talk and truth-telling, and doing that in a way that doesn't paralyze us or paralyze anyone from taking action. If we're going to make a just transition path to climate change solutions, we absolutely have to get into the game. We hope you will leave here today feeling just a little bit more inspired, just a little bit more hopeful. And we also hope that if you have not already joined NC Warren, or if your membership has lapsed, that you will consider joining NC Warren today. Before I introduce Charly Lowry, who will kick us off with a culture performance, I want to encourage you to pull out your phones as long as they're on silence or mute mode, and use your social media accounts to tweet or, hashtag CleanPath2025, so that all of your friends and relations can see where you are. And of all the places that you could be right now, we're absolutely thrilled that you're here with us. So we have several speakers in addition to Bill Powers today. We have Donna Chavis, who I will introduce shortly. We have the Reverend Dr. Nelson Johnson and Mrs. Johnson, who I affectionately call Sister Joyce. And we have Jean Sue, and I will again be doing specific introduction and ask specific questions. So we like to do a lot of cultural work in the work that we do. It's important that we use the arts and music and song and spoken word to give us hope and inspiration. So I would like to introduce to you Charly Lowry. Charly is a founding member of Dark Water Rising, a Robeson County band that harnesses the sounds of soul, rock, country, and R&B. Charly was a 2004 American Idol semifinalist and won a 2010 Native American Music Award in the category of debut duo or group.
Thank you, Ms. Connie. Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be here with so many others who love and care for Mother Earth, Mother Nature, and it makes me think of my mother. Her name was Dolores Lowry. Coming up of Tuesday of next week, she will have been gone a year. I lost her last November, and she was the very first person that instilled a love for nature and for the land in me, and respect, and knowing and growing up knowing that life is sacred, all life is sacred, and that we are stewards of this land, and it's our responsibility to take care of it while we're here. And thinking about Mother Nature and my mother and the umbilical cords that connect us together, and it just makes me want to uplift women, our queens. And so I wrote this song, and I wanted to share it with you today for our women in the audience. I wrote this song years ago when I was a student at UNC Chapel Hill, and coming from Robeson County and going to Chapel Hill from a small town called Pembroke. it was a bit of a culture shock for me. It didn't help that I speak like this with my Lumbee dialect, and every time I turned around, somebody said, "What did you say? Say that again." But I thought about our young girls and the pressures that they may face in society to act a certain way or speak a certain way or dress a certain way. And the more I sing it, the more the message in this song crosses racial lines, and all women can relate to this message. Again, this song is called Brown Skin, and it encourages each of you to never forget where you come from, regardless of who your parents are, what kind of job you have. Each one of us is beautiful, ladies, in our own way, and we all have something special to contribute to this world. Brown skin. An existence so beautiful, so colorful, deep-rooted in originality. Eye candy of shallow minds, that was her reality. Still, she walks around with a smile for the whole wide world to see. Inside's a screaming for yourself from strains of society. Brown skin, why do you hide the pain within? Brown skin, brown skin. Day in, day out, it's the same, living by the standards of a male domain. She can't help but recognize the stares, cause of who she's talking to or the clothes she wears. Yet she holds her head up high for the whole wide world to see. Inside's a screaming for yourself from strains of society. Brown skin, why do you hide the pain within? Brown skin, brown skin, brown skin, why do you hide the pain within? Brown skin, how long will you continue to pretend that who you know where you go won't face the life you live? That what you do where you be will catch up with you in the end. Yes. Live your own life, don't worry about the need to please. Be the queen of your own society. Yes. Brown skin, brown skin, brown skin, brown skin. Ooh, hey, hey, ooh, hey, hey.
So Donna Chavis is from Pembroke, here in North Carolina. Donna is an elder of the Lumbee Nation and long-standing environmental justice organizer. She is a member of the leadership team of the North Carolina Climate Justice Collective. She is founder of the Red-Tailed Hawk Collective, Our Communities Care for Culture and Climate, and was co-founder of the Center for Community Action with her husband, Mac Ledgerton. Donna also currently serves as the Atlantic Coast Pipeline lead campaigner for Friends of the Earth. Please help me welcome Donna Chavis to the stage.
Thank you all. Can you all hear me? Oh, thank you. Never quite sure how to direct these things. I have to say, after hearing Charly, I'm just a little bit emotional every time I hear that song. So thank you, Charly. I remember her when she was in middle school. So it's been a wonder to watch her grow and become the woman that she is. I want to start with affirmations, and affirming Charly is the first one. But I want to thank NC Warren for this opportunity, and not just for today, but the many opportunities that are given to so many to be able to speak their truth and to speak it from the place of authenticity and sincerity that I heard Charly speaking tonight when she was singing that song. I also want to lift up my ancestors, and as I was writing these words, I thought, I remember when I used to lift up the elders, but now I am one. But I do lift up my ancestors and all of those whose shoulders I have stood. Many of them mothers, grandmothers, and aunties. So I bring them all in the room with me today, as well as my father, uncles, and brothers, all that have come before me. Today is a day also that the Native American Heritage Month has been recognized and celebrated over at the North Carolina Museum of History. And I come to you from there. So I come full of heart, and I bring that love with me as well into the room. And I know I'm being timed, and I wrote it out so I wouldn't be too long. So I will stop talking now, Miss Connie. But at any rate, what I would like to speak of first, and this isn't where I started, so I'll cut out some of the written word. For the past 3 years, I have been working almost completely and intentionally with Native peoples in North Carolina to consider the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And I use that word considered on purpose. There was a lot of information and a lot of education that had to be done, because in Native communities, not only was there a great need to learn about what was being proposed, but also to learn more about what their rights were as Native people who had government-to-government relationships with the state of North Carolina, and who was not being included in the conversations about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So about 3 years ago, I started the Native American Initiative to bring more recognition and information and understanding about what was happening. Now, I'm glad to say that there were many positive steps taken along the route in those 3 years, in that the intentionality of bringing the tribes and nations in relationship with the state along this line of being involved with the decision-making about what was going to be coming through their communities, standing up for the culture and the history that was so deep there, did have some positive results. And so there is more conversations going on between the tribal nations government and the state government. But there's still a long way to go, still a very long way to go. Sometimes we're said yes to give access, but it doesn't give influence. And we have to cross that line. We have to move from access to influence. And that's what we're working on right now. Not just with Native communities, but with the impacted communities along the route of the pipeline. But I want to talk with you a little bit today about some words that are used and about environmental justice and injustice. One of the words that is very often used in Native communities is sacrifice zone. Now, the term sacrifice zone has been marked to the point of the Cold War, whenever it began to be used in relationship to nuclear disasters. And literally it is, where would sacrifice zones be allowed in the United States? Think about that. How many of you all have heard about sacrifice zones? Okay, so you all, I'm talking to folks who know what's going on. Well, in the context of the ACP, sacrifice zones has come up very often, because once again it is felt that while so much of the land had already been taken, it seemed like once more people were saying that it was once again being stolen from them, either by government interest or by corporate interest, and oftentimes it wasn't possible to see the difference between the two. So sacrifice zones is a very important term. And environmental discrimination. We talk about environmental justice. Well, environmental discrimination is one issue that environmental justice seeks to address. Racism and discrimination against communities of color and impacted communities center on a socially dominant group's belief in its superiority, often resulting in privilege for the dominant group and the mistreatment of others. And this has been an ongoing conversation now for the past 3 years. The combined impact of these privileges and prejudices are just one of the potential reasons that waste management and high pollution sites tend to be located in minority-dominated areas. Now, the best early history of environmental justice can be found on the website of the United Church of Christ. And I go there for a certain reason, because it was through the work of the United Church of Christ in Warren County, North Carolina. And I say that again, Warren County, North Carolina. Warren in the house. That the term was coined by Reverend Ben Chavis, and no, I'm not related to him. We're still working out the genealogy to see, but I get that question, so I figured I might as well answer it up front, so it's not asked during the reception time. And so I was very pleased to serve on the Commission for Racial Justice and the Planning Committee for the First National People of Color Environmental Summit. So as Connie said, I've been involved with this for a very long time. The Commission was also responsible for the landmark 1987 report on toxic waste and race in the United States. Can I see hands of anybody who might have seen that report? A few. Well, that was landmark, and Reverend Chavis was quoted as saying that in a New Yorker article that Warren County made headlines, and because it made headlines in the media, we began to get calls from other communities. But you know that in the 80s, you couldn't just say there was discrimination, you had to prove it. And it was that report that proved all of the points that was being made about environmental racism and environmental discrimination. So again, the title of that report is Toxic Waste and Race in the United States. It is still very relevant. So the current proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline runs through 8 counties in North Carolina that fit the profile of environmental injustice. Those 8 counties are rural, predominantly Tier 1 counties of persistent poverty, with disproportionate populations of communities of color, predominantly African American and Native American. In Robeson County alone, our population is 68% communities of color, with 42% of that being Native American, and yet there's no disproportionate impact. Robeson County is the most diverse rural county in the United States, and as I said, 68% of the population comes from predominantly Native and African American. It's no accident that after 3 alternative routes, and there were 3 alternative sites that you can no longer find on the internet, maybe NC Warren has some fancy web people that could find it, but they were taken down because those sites ran closer to Raleigh and more affluent communities. And the one that was finally settled on was the one that runs through the 8 counties of persistent poverty. Now, all of these elements relate to environmental injustices. I want to step back a minute, though, and say that this is not only about environmental justice. This is about the fact that we do not need the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, no matter where it goes. I don't want this in your home any more than I want it in my home. This is not a NIMBY. We are about stopping it because it is not needed. The home of the modern environmental justice movement is now under more serious attack than it was in the 1980s and 1990s, when toxic waste and radioactive waste facilities were being forced upon eastern North Carolina. While the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline is the greatest and most formidable present threat to our people and places we live and love in eastern North Carolina, it is certainly not the only environmental threat, an example of environmental justice and genocide. both coal ash and industrial livestock operations, specifically the hog and chicken industries, preceded the environmental and social injustice of the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And Hurricane Matthew and Florence made us really aware of the hog and chicken waste whenever we were inundated with water throughout the east. Add to that other gas pipelines, including 2 new ones in Robeson County since 2010 that will connect to the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline if constructed, along with a liquid natural gas plant announced by Duke Energy, a proposed $35 million biogas plant, leaking coal ash, our forests being destroyed to make wood chips to export as biomass fuel to Europe. That is what the East, all of the East is facing, but all of those are in one county of Robeson. How many of you have ever heard the term, kill the Indian and save the man? Okay, a few of you have. That was coined by a Captain Richard H. Pratt, who founded the Carlisle School. Now, we've heard a lot in the press about Canada's boarding schools. Well, we don't hear much about the United States boarding schools, even though children were being sent to these boarding schools, taken from their families, into the 1960s. And from there, they would then be put in foster care and adopted in non-Indian families. And so one of the things that I had wanted to share, but we didn't have tables, so I couldn't pass the picture around. But I want to show a picture here of what I consider to be an example of one of the first environmental injustices. This was in the 1800s, where it's a mountain of skulls of the buffalo, which is what it was called. Bison is the official term. And this was an intentional killing of 50 million buffalo so that the Indian would die. So when people say, I just can't believe that our government is doing all of this, imagine what the impacted communities feel. It's like it's been done since day one. But the resilience of the buffalo is the example that I wanted to end with, because through combination of the native peoples, even politicians, and the national park system, the buffalo is back and healthy, and again, living in sacred ways with the native peoples. So we are fighting and we are coming back, and the buffalo is our example of how we could put a few buffalo on the pipeline route.
There's a lot of exciting information already coming to you, and more, especially from Bill Powers, about breakthroughs that are happening in the electric power industry, that some of which really represent game changers, we believe. Before we go there, I want to briefly just pick up on the earlier discussion about the climate crisis. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is a good organization. They've got a lot of people that are doing what they can to try to get the science out. As a lot of folks know, their work tends to lag sometimes several years behind the cutting edge science. So I regret to tell you the climate situation is even more urgent than what you've been hearing so far. The fact is that Jim Hansen, Michael Mann, Oppenheimer, other leading scientists say we have essentially already baked in 1.5 C above pre-industrial times based on emissions that are out there already, and that we are going to hit 1.5 many years before the IPCC has said. The worst of it is that while the IPCC correctly said that we need to cut emissions, global average greenhouse emissions, by nearly half by 2030, many of the scientists are saying that we have to begin bringing those down within a couple of years or so. Global emissions, greenhouse gases have continued to rise. Global warming has speeded up in the last 5 years. So the pace of warming is rising. And we have to begin bringing down emissions within a couple of years if we're going to avoid the point of no return. So with all the suffering already going on, The situation is worse than dire. But we are here today to talk about the very real opportunity that we have, and especially in North Carolina, to help turn things around. And big changes can and do happen very quickly sometimes. And based on our work with Bill Powers, and especially over the last couple of weeks with his new report coming together, we are really excited that we in this room and the local governments that we can work with can build the pressure to go with clean energy and efficiency ourselves, but also to build the political pressure to require Duke Energy to get on the right side of the climate crisis instead of driving it worse.
The unnecessary expansion of frac gas infrastructure in North Carolina, whether it be the building of more gas plants or the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline, runs counter to the just transition to a clean energy economy that we are promoting. So thank you, Donna, for raising that. Our next speakers are speaking as a team, speaking as a couple, the Reverend Dr. Nelson Johnson and Sister Joyce Johnson. Reverend Johnson and Sister Johnson are co-executive directors of the beloved Community Center of Greensboro. Reverend Nelson is the founding pastor emeritus of Faith Community Church in Greensboro, the site of the Solar Freedom Legal Challenge. Sister Joyce is a former business professor and transportation research director at North Carolina A&T University. Both have been intensely involved in the movement for social and economic justice since high school. The Johnsons are leaders in the Poor People's Campaign and have served on the Council of Elders, the National Council of Elders, which includes leaders of social justice movements of the 20th century. They received the 2017 NCAACP President's Award from Bishop Dr. William J. Barber II, and the 2015 John Blackburn Award from NC Warren. It is my pleasure to invite North Carolina's social justice power couple to the stage.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up the freedom way. Ain't gonna let Duke power turn us around, yeah, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let Duke power turn us around. We're gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up the freedom way. And that includes solar freedom. So good afternoon and greetings from the National Council of Elders, the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, and the North Carolina NAACP, the beloved Community Center for sure, but mostly greetings from the Faith Community Church, a small church, and some of you, Donna and Connie and Jim and others have been there. We truly are a small congregation. But we have the audacity to believe in Psalms 24:1 that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and all who dwell within, and that our God shall supply all of our needs according to God's riches. And of course, Philippians 4:13, which is my mantra that my grandmother called making a way out of no way. So when we were approached by NC Warren to take on this project on all of our behalf, we felt that we were doing what we were instructed to do by our then pastor and from the script of what God's people should do. And certainly in unity with our brothers and sisters, our Native Americans have spoken about Mother Earth. So we believed that we truly could make a way out of no way. And Jim mentioned today at lunch that we lost in court. We call it, Jim, more a temporary setback, not a loss. Because though the courts ruled against us, more and more of the people around us learned about the audacity of Duke Power to think that it owned the sun that was given to all of us. The audacity to believe that it could increase its profits over God's people. So I'm going to stop now, turn this over to the preacher in the family, but say that he's not going to preach, I don't think. You never know. But that let us keep walking together. Because as Al Gore said when he was here, and I saw a lot of your faces then at the ecological justice gathering that the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign had in Greensboro in August, that one of the greatest sources of renewable energy is us. Right. Is people. It is renewable. So this thing can be done. Solar freedom can be obtained if we really continue to work together. So thank you and God bless you.
I want to first express my appreciation to all of the creative work that's going on and that's been brought to us today. It's a great gift. It is a blessing to know that people over the nation are carving new highways of justice in order to curb the ecological devastation that's going on in our nation and in the world. Let me thank Sister Donna for reintroducing us to sacrifice zones and to bring it up to date. In some sense, we think of history as something done and past and gone. History is with us every moment. What is history except everything that happened before the last 30 seconds? You know? So it's accumulative in that sense, and it's all important for us to understand that. I want to say ditto to what Joyce has said. And as Joyce and I grow older, we are increasingly working as a pair or as a team. And things seem to work better that way. So I want to commend that methodology to the Duke culture, to the political culture of North Carolina, which seem to be moving in the opposite direction. We are so bitterly divided that it's hard to see beyond the partisan and narrow economic interest so as to care for the common good. So I hope our gathering today is characterized by inclusiveness and a seeking and a yearning and a hunger for long-term common good of humanity. I want to, I can't let you applaud too long, my time is running out. I want to thank North Carolina Warren for the opportunity to participate in this most timely, important, and dare I say, urgent gathering to explore and build unity around a clean path to achieving economically clean energy future. A future that engages the crisis of climate change, the crisis of sustainable development, and the crisis of poverty, as well as our moral responsibility, as Donna said, to be good stewards of this earth. I've been asked to say some words about the moral and ethical implication of our current situation as it relates to climate change, the quality of life on this planet, and especially the quality of life for the poor. And when somebody has been neglected and left out, you have to put in the especially part. because everything is not even right now. I want to talk about one of the founding members of our church. Her name is Linda Jones, and she was a beautiful and committed and loving sister. And when we found the church 25 years ago, we built in our mission statement that we were a poor church, and we wanted to be committed to the love and the care of each other, with special attention on the poor, and with special attention on the only earth that we have. And Sister Jones, one of the founders, I can remember seeing her cutting her pills in half and taking her pill box and skipping a day in order to pay her electric bill. Now that's on the ground. She was a beautiful sister. She passed on some years ago, and we buried her, and it was a painful funeral because I knew she died before her time. That is a moral question, that people are denied the medical help that they need in order for some company to put out an ad spending $80 million to inform and mislead people. And so what we're saying is that this is a moral question. Linda represents thousands of poor people in Greensboro, in North Carolina, and around the United States. We find in this tragic net too much wealth locked in the hands of too few people, and too many people trapped in cages of poverty, some sleeping under bridges and on tattered rags and in cardboard boxes, while others are wallowing in the obscenity of too much unearned wealth. This is a moral question. In a sense, today's poor people are the miner's canary, because what's happening to the poor today will be happening to everyone tomorrow. Recently, I heard a television report that the world has had 26 500-year storms in the last 10 years. I thought a 500-year storm would come every 500 years. If my math is correct, using that measurement, it would take 13,000 years to have 26 500-year storms. Something is terribly wrong with this picture. With floods and hurricanes, tornadoes and fires intensifying, this is a moral question, and it is staring us in the face every day. And only the blind cannot see it. And oftentimes people are blinded by their interest in money and their disinterest in the welfare of God's people. The hurricanes and the floods in our state and in the last several years ought to be a message to us. You can see the hurricane of poverty has been blowing over poor people for a long time. It is now beginning to blow over everyone as the waters and the wind and the fire does not discriminate. The abuse of the earth is simply an extension of our historical abuse of each other, especially the poor. Now, I'm not trying to make everybody feel good today. I'm trying to make you think a little bit. But I am happy today because I am hopeful that North Carolina Warren and all who are gathered here are beginning to fashion a different energy paradigm. And this new paradigm, some of which we heard so beautifully today, will assess the moral and human costs, the ecological costs, and in tandem with the economic costs. I hear a call from the spirit of the universe saying, wake up, North Carolina. Wake up, people. Learn to work together and walk together. So in closing, I want to borrow a few words from an old slave spiritual, if I can call upon the ancestors just for a moment. When my ancestors were way down yonder by themselves, couldn't hear nobody pray, God whispered something, and they heard the word of God. They heard a voice from God of the universe saying, walk together, children, and don't you get weary. Don't worry about the news report. Just walk together, children, and begin to walk closer and closer, and don't you go weary. And so I say to you today, walk together, climate change people, and don't you go weary. Walk together, energy producers, and Duke Energy included, and don't you go weary. Walk together, all of God's children, and don't you go weary, because there is light beyond the darkness. There is hope beyond what appears to be hopelessness. There is positive energy in our bright tomorrows beyond the bleakness of yesterday. So I leave you, brothers and sisters, not on a down note, but believing that we are coming together, we are building together, we are walking together, and as the old slaves used to say, walk together, children, and don't you get weary, because there is a great camp meeting. There is a great victory. There is a great coming together in the promised land. God bless you. Let's keep on working together and never give up.
A supplemental report to the 2017 Clean Path Plan. You will have a more extensive introduction about Bill Powers, but I just want to pull out a couple things. So we already know that he's the author of the report, Achieving an Economical Clean Energy Future. He's a registered professional mechanical engineer in California with over 30 years of experience in energy and environmental engineering. He wrote the 2012 Strategic Energy Plan, Bay Area Smart Energy 2020 for the San Francisco Bay Area. You can read about his degrees. He already mentioned earlier he went to both Duke and Carolina. So please take the time when you go through the supplementary report at a more leisurely pace to find out more about Bill. Help me welcome to the stage Bill Powers.
You want to work that? Okay, can everybody hear me? Well, after following those four inspirational performers and speakers, I'm going to modify my presentation a little bit. I think I'm going to go only for the inspirational parts of it, to the extent that they are inspirational, as opposed to getting too much into details. Maybe we can go to the second. So first, what I'd like to do is just review what the broad objectives are of Clean Path 2025. Clean, local, cost-effective, reliable power generation, rapid expansion of local solar and energy storage in homes, buildings, parking lots, vacant urban land. 25% of homes and commercial buildings with 100% solar by 2025. That rises to 50% by 2030. Objective is to displace existing coal and gas-fired power, over a 50% reduction in power generated by coal and gas by 2025, and net elimination by 2030. All customers benefit, no cross subsidies, pays for itself, stable rates. What do you think? Yeah. All right. You want to give that to me? So we're about to go to the next slide, I think. Okay. Should I just wing it? Okay, well, we're going to wing it. It's going to get more inspirational than I was even planning. So first thing I want to do is talk about what's happened since this was published back in July 2017 that is positive. And one very positive thing is that, especially out west, California, Arizona, utility scale battery storage is beating gas turbines. It's beating existing gas turbines for contracts. It's beating new gas turbines. Batteries alone, batteries with solar power. And so in the industry's mind at this time, batteries can beat gas turbines. That's great news, because that's the industry itself making this determination. The Clean Path is really not focused on that utility scale level. If you look at that circle, that's around local distribution grid, industry, homes, businesses. That's where the focus is for this project. And one of the most inspirational projects out there along this model is the Green Mountain Power Project with Tesla, which started up late last year. The objective is to deploy 2,000 power walls in individual homes, low to moderate income homes, and aggregate those power walls as a single dispatchable virtual power plant. And that project also, because it's making money, and this is an investor-owned utility, just like Duke, that because they're getting a lot of the benefits, like Don Herod had mentioned that his system gets in Minster, Ohio, they can heavily discount those battery systems to the users. In fact, very little cost for the user. That system really just started getting deployed last summer, and in July alone, deploying only 500 of those units as a virtual power plant, they saved over $500,000. And I really do see that as the future, that type of project, especially because with a little bit lower cost on batteries, you can install those batteries in people's homes at no cost to them, and the utility can still make money. So for reasons of time, I'm going to skip over this detail, and we're going to go into more interesting and uplifting facts, which is the government of South Australia and Tesla announced a project that's 25 times bigger than the Tesla project in Vermont. And this is a 250 megawatt project involving 50,000 homes, and really brings up this model to a utility scale size. But one critical part of this, especially for North Carolina with ice storms, hurricanes, and constant threats of getting your power knocked out, is that everybody's got a battery in their home. And so when that happens, it's a seamless form of coverage. And that is a very strong benefit to this approach. There's been a precipitous drop in the cost of batteries. This is a chart for lithium batteries where the cost dropped by 3/4 from 2010 to 2016, is projected to drop at the same rate to 1/4 of 2016 by 2030, which is great for the planet because it means these systems can be deployed at much lower cost than utility costs, which continue to rise. At the same time, just very recently, a old battery technology that's been used in hearing aids forever, zinc air, non-rechargeable, has been developed that's rechargeable, so it can compete directly with lithium. And that will spur an even faster drop in battery prices. Interestingly enough, one of the locations that proved out this technology is the Duke Energy cell tower in the mountains, where they used this battery technology. They determined it was highly reliable, and so they took out the distribution line that was feeding that cell tower, which was not particularly reliable. And the 13 acres in that right-of-way was returned, that land was returned to the national park. And that particular project really served as the exclamation point on a big New York Times article on this technology, that this is a new wave technology. The materials are low cost, zinc and air, and it is a great development in terms of driving down not only the cost of batteries, but offering an excellent alternative. Duke is following an interesting pattern. They had that project, the cell tower project. They also have just applied for a microgrid project in the town of Hot Springs, where they're going to put in enough battery and solar basically to cover that town of 500 people, even if they lose the grid and they're islanded. I mean, that really is the model for the rest of the state. The problem with Duke, though, is it's been doing this as pilot projects. And Duke is quite aware that batteries are the next and ultimate wave. This is a few quotes from a Duke executive. In 5 years, batteries will blanket the US. There's going to be a lot of excitement around batteries in the next 5 years. It's a big opportunity for all of us to deliver what customers want. And apparently that last line has not been getting around in the boardroom. And he was definitely off on his own for a bit, but telling the truth, that is the situation. And however, we are in a situation where Duke has really generated a lot of publicity about adding 300 megawatts of battery storage over the next 15 years as part of their strategic plan. What they don't say in the press release is they're adding 10,000 megawatts of gas turbines, and that this is really just a minor element of their strategy. Their plan is to get to 8% renewables by 2033 in the current plan. And I think I've seen this strategy before, especially in California, where the utilities, the investor-owned utilities, will build an entire generation of gas turbines. And almost the moment they're done building them, we start retiring them because renewable energy and storage comes in. And it's a politically safe way to go, but it's a tremendous waste of time and money to do that. And so your objective here is to turn those numbers around, that it's 300 megawatts of gas turbines and 10,000 megawatts of battery storage by 2033. That's the plan. One of the reasons for focusing on public utilities, rural co-ops and municipal utilities in the plan is because of the fact that they have been leading the pack in putting in solar and batteries around the country. And part of this update was to look at some of the utilities looked at in the plan. One of them is Kauai Electric, an island that has no connection to the mainland, an island that has no corporate attachment that would require it to take power from another entity. And they've just been doing a spectacular job. They're at 70% renewable power. A third of that comes from batteries and storage, and they hope to be at 90% renewable power within a few years. And it's just a demonstration of, if you're focused on the objective and you're trying to get the job done cost effectively with really the tools that we have to deal with the climate issue and the impacts of energy, Kauai Electric is definitely a utility to watch. Sterling up in Massachusetts is an interesting case where they were looking at a gas turbine or a battery to provide the ability to microgrid an island, have their police station and other critical services protected in case of an outage. And this project also serves as a good model for neighborhood scale microgrids that have solar dispersed as well as battery storage right at the substation. Minster, Ohio, Don Herod, who's been the driver behind their spectacular battery and storage project, is here, so I won't go into Minster other than to say that an entity with a little bit of independence that has a good idea and is willing to pursue it can do amazing things, even with a very small scale utility. I want to talk briefly about the implications of HB 589 because it's a mixed bag, but it's tending negative. And there are things that need to be protected to make sure North Carolina can keep moving fast on clean energy future. Net metering for the time being is protected, but that will have to continue to be protected because Duke will get a shot at coming up with a different formula next year. There are some fairly boutique programs in the legislation, incentives for net metering, some solar leasing. Some of this is good, but it's on a very small scale. The amount of solar that North Carolina has been putting in at multi-megawatt levels has been fairly spectacular in recent years. In 2017, it was 1,200 megawatts in 1 year. North Carolina is number 2 after us in California on solar. Very impressive solar deployment rate. HB 589 will slow that down significantly by cut it to about in half. Still significant, but slower than it has been. And one of the somewhat darker parts of this story is the solar developers do want to start putting storage in with their proposals. And they have been prevented from doing that in the first round. They hope to work that out in the second round. They have been saying that Duke is now trying to monopolize the solar, the storage aspect of this. Just another thing to stop and push back on so that the promise of doing very high levels of storage aren't delayed or sidetracked by these types of shenanigans. I talked earlier, how many of you were listening to me speak maybe an hour and a half ago about munis? Almost enough to make me skip this, but I think I'm going to say a couple of things about it. That North Carolina municipal utilities and rural co-ops are more constricted than a couple of the examples that I just gave. They have statewide associations. Those associations either supply most or all of the power to the individual munis or rural co-ops, and they in turn get much of their power from Duke Energy. And so the opening for the munis and the electric or the rural co-ops is at the lowest level. The unlimited opening is at the meter of the homeowner and the business, the retail level. And so that virtual power plant with Vermont and Tesla can be deployed almost to an unlimited extent in North Carolina. As you move up and try and deploy bigger levels of storage and solar, you start hitting these contractual limitations. Even though there's been some nice work done at Brunswick Rural Co-op, they put in solar and storage at scale at 12 of their substations. They are working on a 30-home microgrid. They've already put in the solar and storage on a few of those homes. Great opportunity to demonstrate at a small scale a virtual power plant in North Carolina and hopefully spark this being done at a much greater level and faster level in the state. And they've also put in a pretty competitive net metering program, which isn't that common at the rural co-op level, and getting a good response and or just hitting 1 megawatt of net metered residential and commercial solar. Final comment on examples, Duke University. How many of you are aware of the controversy over Duke University wanting to put in a Duke Energy combined heat and power system? A couple of you. And so this has become a hot button issue for NC Warren. I worked on this project with them. Interesting development this year is they finally did a study of their solar potential on campus. They had been saying it was 4 megawatts. Now they say it's 87 megawatts. Well, that's a different number. And it also is a big enough number to completely offset the output of that combined heat and power plant. And so they have an opportunity to turn it around and turn that campus into a solar and battery storage showcase for the Southeast. And one of the techniques they may have is there's a federal law from 40 years ago, PURPA, that allows to promote independent power production. And the campus could potentially become an independent power producer, auto supply, and then pull in what they need in addition to that from the grid. That could work in other contexts as well, but in this case, using Duke University as an example. And as Jim Warren said earlier, part of this plan is also to make it accessible to everyone. That regardless of income level, everyone has a fair shot at having solar and batteries. And on-bill financing means that if you can pay an electric bill, you can get the solar and batteries with no further questions asked about credit history or anything else. And the same with the PACE program that Bill Jensen mentioned from Apex is another way to allow people without putting money up front to put these systems on their homes and businesses. And so in conclusion, there's a lot of momentum in North Carolina behind this model for solar and batteries. Customers want it. And Duke may actually be forced to shift from a business strategy of framing these battery projects as a perpetual pilot project into a mainstream energy strategy for the company, because if they don't do it, and at the lowest level, the individual residents and business level, people start deploying this en masse, they just miss the boat. It happens and they don't get to make any money off of it. And so the more people that do this and the faster they do it, the more pressure there will be on Duke to change the model just to maintain its revenue stream. That's my inspirational comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Our final speaker, before we get to our Q&A and tell you a little bit about some other things that you can do, is Jean Sue. So Jean Sue is the Energy Director of the Climate Law Institute and a staff attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, where she specializes in energy and climate change issues. Jean's energy work focuses on growing access to renewable energy, including challenging discriminatory behavior against distributed solar energy, as well as phasing out fossil fuel production. Prior to joining the center, Jean practiced as a renewable energy project finance attorney for Milbank, Tweed, Hadley, and McCoy LLP in Singapore and Los Angeles, and as a management consultant focused on climate change with McKinsey and Company in China, and a development worker with CARE International in Madagascar. For our international perspective on a just transition, I present to you Jean Sue.
Well, this has been quite an afternoon. I think that, before we start, we should just take a deep breath and look around the room and see all the incredible inspiration around you. Every single person in this room, everyone who has been at this podium, the incredible NC Warren staff who has been this spearheaded leader in North Carolina in doing this. Just congratulations to all of you. This has been an incredibly inspirational day. So I think in light of what Connie said, and apologies, I didn't realize you were going to read that whole thing, is that I would talk a little bit about the global and federal level type of things that are going on, just to place us a bit in the context of what's going on. I think for me personally, and I go into this story first, is to talk about how the impacts of climate change are as local as everyone here has felt it in the past few years. But moreover, it is so global in that climate change is not tomorrow, it is now, and it was so many years prior to this, and people do not understand that in a lot of different places. So I'll talk first about how I got involved with this. I began as a poverty worker in Madagascar, and I was brought in to try to do microfinance pilot projects with women, with single mothers who were tilling the fields. Their husbands had run off and they were tirelessly planting. And what happened all of a sudden when we were out there is that one freak cyclone just kind of pummeled the entire area. And when I say freak cyclone, I mean it went above my head. I had to actually swim in it. That was how bad the waters were. And that was actually 2 weeks before they were going to plant all of their harvest. So all of these women had already been out on the fields, had planted their rice seed, and the season was closing in 2 weeks. And this storm came and wiped out everything, so they had nothing. The only people left on the island who had anything were these random Chinese landowners in the middle of Madagascar who had been there for a couple of generations, and they had concrete homes. So they said, okay, I will lend you some seeds that you can go out and have a next harvest, that you can survive. Well, what happened is that those women made those choices. They lent out and sold off half of their property to give to these landowners just for rice seed. And they tirelessly went out and planted it even though they were starving. And guess what? 2 weeks later, another freak cyclone came. And within the next 4 months, 4 more cyclones came. So people there were screaming, the climate is changing, the climate is changing. And I had no idea what climate change palpably was until I was there with these women all across this island in a place where life is so fragile. We're lucky here. Many people are lucky here because there is some sort of social safety net. But when you're in that situation and you have nothing, there is no safety net, you understand what fragility means and how climate change exacerbates that to a level you have never understood. So that's where I come from when I think about climate change, that it is so global and it is so local. I can't even speak to the horrific experiences that people have had on this coast in the last few years. This is absolutely heartbreaking. So when we look at how climate change is as global as it is local, we then have to understand that the politics of climate change are as global as they are local. So everyone here knows that these midterms, it's been clear that politics is local. Well, I have to tell the politicians here not in this room, but everywhere else, and people who don't understand this, that their choices on climate change matter not only to their local communities, who is everyone here, but also globally. It actually matters to people who are suffering from climate change in a way that they don't understand. And so I just want to give everyone an incredible round of applause, and especially our politicians in the room who have made such incredible strides in climate change, because your local actions matter. They matter on such an incredible scale that you can't even believe. And so cheers and kudos to every single person in this room who's been an advocate, advocating for their local politicians, their state politicians, their federal politicians, because it matters. Everything that you have done matters. So congratulations to you. So on that level, I'll let you know that in 2 weeks, I'm going to the global climate negotiations in Poland. We go every year and to influence our federal politicians and global leaders to actually make a difference in what they're doing. One thing that might be interesting to you is that there is no term fossil fuels or energy in the Paris Agreement. They don't talk about renewable energy. They don't talk about energy at all. They just say greenhouse gas emissions. But there is no actual obligation on paper to do what Bill is talking about. So that's why when you have it at this global level, this apathy at a global level, the ability to be captured by corporations at that global level, that's why you need the incredible things that Bill and everyone in this room is talking about on a local level to get energy on paper and in our obligations of what we need to do. So in closing, one of the things I know Connie really wanted us to talk about is the how. What does this look like? So we've heard about the why and the what, the technological what, but let's talk a little bit more about the how. How are we going to actually get from A to B? And the primary thing about that how is to ask about the transition. And what does that transition really look like? It's not just about the finances that we're going to raise. It's not about the solar panels that we're going to put on. It's about the greater cultural and societal significance of that new power system. This is a broken system, and I think everyone understands that now. Our electricity system was built on something that was made in the late 1800s. And actually, if you think about it in a historical standpoint, at that point in the late 1800s, nobody had power. So these private companies, so Edison invented electricity, and these private companies started giving out power, and suddenly they were selling it, and all these lines were taken over everywhere. So the government said, oh my goodness, we need to cut a deal with a couple of private companies so that they can supply it. It's a private-public partnership. They can supply it, and at the end of the day, we'll just sit back and kind of make things a little bit more stable. And what they were thinking at that time was actually democratizing power. And that's an incredible concept. It was founded on the idea that everybody deserves power and that it is a fundamental human right at that point. We all deserved electricity. But take it 130 years later and look what's happened at that model. That model no longer applies today because that fundamental power of us all having electricity, we now don't have choice to ask and demand what we want. That there is a legal system in place that is so entrenched with power that we as individuals don't have very much power to change. And so that's exactly what we need to do. So this transition needs to be a wholesale transition on our politics and our legal structure of how electricity gets to us. Yes, absolutely. And what that looks like here in North Carolina is taking a monopoly and making it truly democratic. That's right. That is right. It's about going from dictatorial to actual choice. It is about going from extractive, dirty energy to renewable, regenerative, and clean energy. And as everybody before me has come up on the stage today has said, it is going from an inherently racist and discriminatory system and going to a truly just and fair one. So in all of that, I'll just give a closing. I'm sorry I wouldn't be able to sing. I really did want to, but don't have anything good. But just thank you for your inspiration, because every single person in this room is challenging that system, and we need to change it and transition as fast as possible. And you are all the stars for making it work. Thank you.
One of my opening comments was that I really hope that you left here feeling inspired and feeling hopeful. And thank you for all the speakers for bringing that to fruition. So we're going to have a Q&A period, and then Charly Lowry is going to close us out.
I just wanted Bill to pick up a little bit on a couple of key points. He had it on the slide, but about the pricing of some of the solar with storage projects, and to talk about and explain the demand charge opportunity that the munis and co-ops in North Carolina have, which I think on its own is going to be a game changer.
Sure. The munis and the co-ops, they get their power under these contracts from either their statewide association or from Duke Energy. And about half of what they pay for is the energy, and the other half is what's called the demand charge. And so every month, whatever that peak megawatt level is that they hit, they have to pay about $20 a kilowatt for that. So that's just 50% of what they pay. So they have a strong interest, and they're only up at this level for a couple hours a month. So if they had a technology that could clip that and drop it quite a bit, they could save a lot of money. And that's exactly what storage can do. And so there's a lot of interest among the individual munis and co-ops and their statewide associations to add as much storage as they can under the limitations of their agreements. And that's a very good thing. One other interesting thing that hasn't been sorted out yet is that is energy storage or battery storage a demand response tool, or is it supply? Because if it's demand response, there are no limits at all. And I don't think that question or debate has happened yet. And number two, these projects we were talking about, Minster, Ohio, Hawaii, they're actually generating under those power purchase agreements at a lower cost than the retail residential rate in North Carolina. So the costs are already low enough to be very cost competitive.
I have a question about what we're going to do to further sever some of the ties for this monopoly Duke Power that we're talking about from the legislature and some of these more powerful utility scale companies that they're working with.
We're going to send an NC warrant, right? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's probably not a question I can answer on. Well, I know in other states, one thing that North Carolina has not done much of is net metered solar power at the residential and commercial level. That, when it's done to scale, really pushes the utility to make some changes. I mean, that's what is happening in California. So people have the option to take individual action, they should do it, and it will make a difference.
Can you talk about the life of storage, like ion? You said lithium ion and the
Can you
air,
repeat that?
nickel. The lifetime of
Yeah,
zinc.
These
How
most
that
recent.
how that compares to the turbines you were referring to, the gas
So the question is, what is the guarantee on battery storage systems?
lifetime. How long is it going to be useful before it becomes obsolete?
Usable lifespan. So the guarantees on these lithium systems are 10 years. I would expect they will last 15 or 20. There will be some degradation in their output in those out years. I would expect that the competing technology that I talked about earlier, zinc air, can reach the same lifetime. And so you mean a gas turbine? A gas turbine gets overhauled every certain thousands of hours. Gas turbines can last a long, long time as they're rehabilitated. But I wouldn't say that that's the metric. It's just how long they would last. It's what do they cost to produce power? And without even talking about the greenhouse gas issue, if the battery system's producing at a lower cost, it beats out the gas turbine. We're shutting down gas turbines that could last 50 more years in California because they're getting beat out by battery storage.
When you compared the Green Mountain project to the, I guess the North Carolina average retail rate, you're talking about what the end user pays? What is the cost per kilowatt hour just to generate in the Green Mountain project versus the average, I guess, Duke Power cost to produce, not what it's sold for?
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than a straight cost of production, because what they're using the Green Mountain Power project for is they're aggregating that output and they're using it to cut the capacity charge. They're using it to assure the right frequency and voltage on the system. So they're actually getting all these income streams that Don Herod was talking about in Minster. So it's hard to make that direct comparison. But one thing that is easy to see is they've dropped the cost of that Powerwall from a retail one-off cost of $7,000 to $1,500 for the customers that want it. And that's an investor-owned utility that's got to show a reasonable margin. And so at some point soon, that cost drops to zero. You can just deploy them in homes. And that's really more the answer. You get a free piece of hardware that backs up your home and allows you to operate autonomously, as opposed to a what's the kilowatt hour cost comparison.
Angie Shaddis. So I'm encouraged by all the local initiatives happening all across the country. But in the absence of broad federal legislation or anything pushing renewable energy, I've long thought that the action was at the states. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on statewide renewable portfolio standards. And I had great hopes for these, but last week, a very major one in Arizona was defeated. And they would have gone from 15% renewable by 2025 to 50% in 2030. But it was defeated. And I would like to add that between the support and the opposition campaigns, the money that was spent was almost $54 million, which is just a crying shame because we could have done so much with that money. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are for the states across the country and where the renewable portfolio standards might be going.
I think it's good to have renewable portfolio standard to push a transition. So that's short answer. I mean, it's good to have. I think the renewable portfolio standard is an interim point when you're trying to reduce greenhouse gases and reduce the climate impact. I know they have been a good push in my home state to advance the ball on deployment of renewable energy. Though, that's a good question. I haven't really been asked if I think renewable RPS standards are a main driver or not. I think it sends a message politically. But I think I'm more concentrating on the fact that people would do this because it's in their economic benefit at this point. I mean, you would deploy the solar and the battery in your home because you save money doing it. And most people, that's the primary objective. Unfortunately, it's not just pay extra to put it in. And so RPS standard's good. Having a renewable technology that costs less than grid power, even better, because then people will do it because it's in their economic interest as well.
Under 70. Oh, so we have another under? Okay.
Can you hear me? I'd like to talk a little bit to that. So there was one main financial backer of a lot of those RPS, Tom Steyer, for those who know or don't know him. And you know what's interesting is that renewables renewables and energy had a mixed record in this past midterm season. So we've had a lot of heartbreaks. Although the Arizona one failed, but the Nevada one actually succeeded, and that is a 50 by 2035. So that was really good. We also had a Florida banned offshore drilling, which was amazing. So that was a climate win. But we lost a huge fracking bill in Colorado. But the good news of all of this is that there were 7 to 8 governors who were elected who actually have said they want not Governor Cooper, but other governors out there who said that they really were committed to renewable energy. And so what a lot of folks on the ground in those states are doing is ramping up getting bills onto the state ballot in the next few years to make sure that those promises are actually met. So there are a ton of studies, national studies, that do show that RPSs do matter, for sure, but it just is a mix of RPS, that mandate from top down, but then within the states, breaking down monopoly structures and other kind of legal initiatives like that to make it happen.
Thank you. I wondered what the downside of a lithium-based economy is.
It's a good question. I mean, it is actually one of the reasons for being excited about zinc air batteries is provides an alternative that, I mean, lithium's good. In my opinion, in the broad scheme of things, it's good. Some of the metals that are used in the batteries are sourced from pretty bad neighborhoods around the world, and that has the potential to fuel that a little bit. The advantage of zinc air, and it's one of the things that they are promoting, is that it's just common materials, not necessarily, don't have the same potential to have that create those problems. So I think you're talking a little bit about geopolitical issues, right?
Also environmental. I mean,
in what sense?
Are environmental problems with it too? Getting of it, or what you do with it when you're done with it?
That is also a good question. I know that recycling has started on those, and to be frank, I'm not that up to speed on the level of recycling that goes on with those batteries. To the extent that they're not recycled, that would be a problem.
Carbon fee and dividend legislation, are you familiar with that?
I think I might give that question to Jean if she's up for it, because that's just outside of my orbit.
Thank you. So it has to be designed really carefully. Washington State actually had a carbon tax on their ballot, and we were all hoping if it had passed, so it failed, but if it had passed, it would have been the key experiment in the United States to see if it would work. Other countries are already doing this, so I think that it is an absolute priority. And so part of this, and I thank you for that question, a part of this is that I think everyone has seen this past week this Green New Deal idea come out. Are people familiar with that? Okay, so sort of. So very interesting. So trailblazing Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, under 29, first youngest woman to be elected in Congress. She has taken the mantle on a lot of climate change initiatives, and one of them that is coming out is called the Green New Deal. And what that is, it's actually the Green Party platform on climate change, but it has a series of 10 items, one of which is carbon tax, but 100% renewables, let's decarbonize our transportation industry, all of these good things. And so right now, one of the pushes in DC on the federal level is to actually bring some action to this Green New Deal. So a bunch of people stormed Pelosi's office this last week with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to demand that a committee be set up to actually flesh out legislation for the Green New Deal so that it's out the door and ready to go by 2020. So that's one of the good things. The other part is that Senator Bernie Sanders is also scheming up his own stuff. He has been a huge advocate for carbon tax. So within the next few months, we'll also see some legislation from him that we are involved with as well in trying to craft. So all of those are great things, and we're hoping that on a federal level we can make it happen.
I don't have a question more than a comment. One of the things that I presume that you all are here is because you all are activists of some sort, okay? Now, when you say that you want to interest people because of the economic benefits, I was thinking that we're actually turning things around on its head, because you just heard a lot of speakers talk about how important it is that we preserve the earth, right? That is the right thing to do, that it affects other people globally. And the fact that it's economically advantageous to us should be secondary to all these other points. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that we're all activists here. We want to change our way of thinking, right? We want to change our way of thinking. We shouldn't be thinking of dollars and cents first. We should be thinking about human needs and humanity. Okay, so I'm amazed I'm sitting here and having people quibble about dollars and cents when the speakers have been talking about, hey, we need to do this because it's the right thing for human beings, because it's the future of the young people, right? So I just kind of want to make this comment about my observation.
Yeah, and just let me say, I think it's a both and, but I also want to say that the folk who are suffering first and worst and hurt the most are least responsible for the causes of climate change. So we can't look at the sort of global work that we need to do, and we can all get a Prius, but that's not going to really solve the problem. It's not an individual problem; it's a collective problem as well. So I do want to, add that specific piece.
This is the second time I've been to one of these, and I just want to say that they get better every year.
We're hopefully never going to see the infrastructure and the number of gas plants and, gas pipelines that Duke plans on right now. And I think the price, like you say, is going to drive them away. But it did concern me when I heard that Duke was putting an LNG plant in Robeson County, because I think of Duke Energy in its wildest dreams, thinks that that's the way to do a battery. That's the way to have gas ready when you need it.
Right.
And it really bothers me. But I don't think that that's your bag, but at the same time, I wanted to bring it up. Thanks.
Thank you, Martha.
Can I ask if there are any legal challenges and avenues that are being explored by NC Warren? For example, class action suits. Duke Power steals my excess production every year. Is there any avenue that you've looked into?
I might turn that over to you or to Jim to respond to.
If I heard correctly, I think this will answer that question. Just a few days ago, NC Warren and Friends of the Earth filed essentially a lawsuit in the beginning of a legal action to require a banning of Duke Energy's influence spending in North Carolina. They spend over $80 million a year to make people think they're green and to keep fracked gas and methane out of the news. They have co-opted civic and political leaders, regulators, the news media, and they have propagandized the public to a great degree. I think we have the press summary of that legal action on the table out front, and you can grab that. So that's a great question. This is a political fight, folks. And real quickly, I'd like to say, as Connie said, it's a both and. We need to save energy. We need to use it more wisely. And we need to keep calling out the injustice against humanity here. I think the point of that the economics also are in our favor are an important part so that we can persuade lots of folks who wouldn't necessarily come here today or care as much about the people that are already suffering. But I think the economics are part of what we need to do to help persuade everybody that this is the time to make a big change.
Point you to the screen, and if you are so inclined, or under 40, or no, under 50. Okay, I'll stop joking. We want you to be able to take action, and so those of you who were here for the earlier 2 o'clock, know that we have action teams, and if you stop at the table outside, we can give you more information about that. But we want you to text Clean Path to 44-321 to donate to NC Warren, become a member today, or renew your membership. You can tweet at NC_governor to stop the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline. All right? Great.
Thank you to NC Warren for having me. Ms. Donna, thank you for suggesting me. And this song I'm going to close out with is a song called I Don't Know More. A great mentor of mine by the name of Pure Faye wrote this song along with another artist named Carrie Morin. And it rose from the First Nations people up in Canada in their fight for access to clean water and land. And today I want to dedicate it to a cleaner path towards 2025. And all of the messages that are speaking for us to be mindful in our daily walks and for the greater good of humanity and the collective, and to wake up and to stop remaining idle, to wake up and see that, you know, just because it's not happening in your own backyard doesn't mean that it's not affecting your brothers and your sisters. So this is a song called Idle No More. Wait on, hey, wait on, wait on, wait on. Hey, oh, hey, oh, we all wait on, 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 wait your head on, wait on, wait on, wait your head on. Oh, oh, head on, hey, wait, oh, wait, oh, wait on. Hey, oh, head on, hey, oh, we all wait on, wait, oh, wait on, wait on, wait, oh, head on, wait on, head, oh, head on, head, oh, head on, oh. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. We walk in the light with our brothers and sisters. We stand and fight with a drum, a song, a prayer, this change of time. This is the true reckoning, the human awakening. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. Oh, hey, oh, hey, wait, oh, wait, oh, we don't. Hey, oh, hey, oh, we all wait on, we don't. Wait on, wait, oh, hey, oh, wait, I, hey, oh, hey, I, hey, oh, hey, I, oh. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. People come by the hundred, sing and dance the streets of shopping malls, to the capitals and heart of Standing Rock. All over this Turtle Island, our presence will break the silence. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. Oh, hey, oh, wait, oh, we don't. Hey, oh, hey, oh, we all wait on, we don't. Wait on, wait, oh, hey, oh, wait, I, hey, oh, hey, I, hey, oh, hey, I, oh. Together, brothers and sisters, I don't know more. Thank you.